Hi, I'm Cameron.
And I am Hayden.
And this is
Until the End of Crime.
Welcome to our very first episode.
Welcome to numero uno, a special re-release of our first draft. Obviously untrue.
Yeah, not our first draft, but thank you for being here, especially if it's not your first episode.
Yeah, we welcome you so warmly.
Yeah, I'm always accused of, oh, so warm. It's too warm.
You know, there's a first time for everything. So, yeah.
You have a question for me? Wait, follow us on Instagram. Subscribe.
Wait. Follow us.
Subscribe everywhere. Not even just the places that you listen, but all of the places.
Yeah, like Patreon for only $2 a month.
Oh, we have a new patron.
A new patron?
Yeah.
What is his or her or their name?
I believe Kelly, but let me check.
Kelly?
Yeah, Kelly.
Well, Kelly, we welcome you. We thank you. We're grateful for you. Just like we're thankful for all of our patrons.
And listeners. Everybody.
Yeah. In order, maybe patrons, downloaders, and then streamers. But deep appreciation for you all.
Why are we ranking them?
No rankings. Except maybe. I don't know. We're glad to have you in whatever capacity you're here. And if you like us so much that you're willing to listen, try to like us enough to tell your bestie about us, or a family member, or a friend, or I don't know, clients, first-time home buyers, fourth cousins that you don't know well. Just tell them all. Post it on Facebook.
Or join us on Patreon. Where for only $2 a month, you can help offset some of the cost that it requires to produce this podcast.
Absolutely. You know, Cameron and I share the cost of some of the services that we use. And so we're showing up just because we like to do this for funsies and to provide you with something to enjoy and listen to.
Yeah. I have to think of it as a hobby. And like, if I was somebody who crocheted, this is like paying for it is the yarn, right?
Yeah.
But then sometimes you sell the things that you crochet and you make some money back. Never as much as you've put into it, but you take that money and you go buy more yarn. Right.
Have you ever even had enough ad revenue to cash out?
Oh, we have enough to cash out, yeah. For each ad that is run, we get 1/4 of a penny.
1/4 of a cent for every ad.
Yeah.
That's so wild. The point is, we really do this for fun and for free. And we're just really glad you're here. I love that you want to listen to Cameron. I love that you want to listen to me. And in all honesty, that's enough. So thanks for being here. Okay. Are you ready for the question?
Yes. Love to bumble my way through an answer.
Okay. I don't want to set my question up as a two-parter, but I believe that you had a case that you went over several months ago. It was a very kind of niche Austin case where we had feedback even from family members of the victim who said, oh, we never even knew these details. How did you find them? Mm-hmm. And
it was Carol Kissman Rosenbaum.
And it was at the Okie Dokie.
Yes. The Okie Dokie Saloon, I believe, was one of the places, or was the place where she worked.
Okay. Carol Kissman Rosenbaum.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, today's case kind of has a connection to that. Not in any real material way. But I'm curious, have you ever stayed at a bar until last call?
Yes.
And tell me what... So first off, I never have been.
I believe I've stayed at a bar till last call probably multiple times with your sister.
Well, birds of a feather. What can I say? So
I've probably stayed at several bars until last call. I've always kind of had I don't know, when I'm out and I'm enjoying myself, then I'm energized, right? In that way that people are like, oh, you're an ambivert, but it turns out it's just probably undiagnosed ADHD. So like if I'm there and I'm enjoying myself, I don't want to leave. I don't get tired. I'm energized by being there. But yeah, I've stayed till last call for sure.
And once last call goes up, what happens to the bar? What occurs?
The lights turn on. Ugh. Oh my God, it's awful. They turn the lights on and they start herding you out like cattle. They're like, you don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here. They often, some of them will play Closing Time by Semisonic. Right, yeah.
I love that you bring up that song.
Why?
Well, Closing Time, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Finish your whiskey or beer.
Yeah.
I know who I want to take me home. How often do you see people pairing up at last call?
Honestly, not paying attention to that. Genuinely not paying attention.
Have you ever paired up with someone at last call?
No. Please. Please. Once I'm leaving, I'm decompressing and it's time to go and snuggle with my dog.
Okay.
Like, once I'm going towards the car, I'm like, ooh, jammies, schnauzer, sleepies.
Okay. I don't know how people make it to last call. I don't know how they do it. I don't even really love being out like that. That's just not.
It's not your scene to begin with.
No.
Yeah.
No. Absolutely. Catch me at last call at a trivia game. Catch me at last call at, I don't know. Last call at home, yes. But I don't think you're going to be caught at last call almost anywhere else because you're going to be one of the first to be like, yeah, I'm going to go. Or just Irish goodbye that shit and just dip. Yeah. I never stay long.
Where's Hayden?
Yeah. I love to say hello. I love to check in. I'm not a big drinker. I do people all day long and I love working with people. But by the time that's over, I can't imagine going and doing more peopling. So never have I made it to last call. Never will I. But that brings us to today's case. The case of the last call killer. On the morning of May 5th, 1991, a maintenance worker on the westbound side of the Pennsylvania Turnpike approached a trash barrel at a rest area in Lancaster County. It was early, the kind of cool and damp spring morning that clings to everything in central Pennsylvania. And the barrel was heavy, unusually heavy. He tried to lift the bag inside and couldn't, so ultimately he opened it. What he first saw looked, as he would later tell investigators, like a loaf of bread. But it did not look like a loaf of bread for long. Wrapped inside 8 layered green hefty trash bags were the dismembered remains of a human being. The man's body had been cut into multiple pieces. He had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and back. He had been castrated after death, and his severed penis had been placed inside of his own mouth. The Pennsylvania State Police were called, and an autopsy determined the cause of death as multiple stab wounds. Rigor mortis indicates... Sorry. I just thought rigor mortis.
Rigor mortis. So did I.
No laughing. This is horrific.
Well, yeah.
Rigor mortis indicated the victim had been dead fewer than 37 hours. He was not carrying identification, and investigators initially had no idea who he was. His slight 5'4" frame led troopers to contact a nearby racetrack to ask if any jockeys had gone missing. It would take several days before a break came. The victim's personal belongings, including a bottle of Polo cologne, were found scattered along a separate stretch of the turnpike more than 30 miles from where his body had been dumped.
I'm sorry, including what?
A bottle of Polo cologne. Those belongings helped establish his identity. Peter Stickney Anderson, 54 years old, a former investment banker from Philadelphia. Peter Anderson. Do what? Did you say a lot of dough, you stupid, curmudgeonly...
Just here to make myself laugh, honestly.
Sounds like a lot of dough.
I was like, baker. What do I?
Sounds like a lot of dough. Pillsburyna. Peter Anderson was known as a socialite, a man described by those who knew him as enthusiastic about life and meeting people. Someone who always liked to keep the cocktail hour going. He had been the chairman of a city council campaign committee for his friend Tony Brooks. On the evening of May 3rd, he had traveled to Manhattan with Brooks to attend a fundraiser at the home of Robert Brown, a real estate agent and gay rights activist at a residence near Central Park. After this fundraiser, Anderson went out. He was last seen on Lexington Avenue near a place called the Townhouse Bar, which was an upscale piano bar in Midtown Manhattan that catered primarily to older gay and bisexual men. It was a venue that was known for its elegance, a place where patrons were encouraged to dress well, where professional men visiting the city on business could have a drink, listen to a pianist, and feel safe. Peter Anderson never left that evening alive. Not really. Whatever happened between the townhouse and the Pennsylvania Turnpike ended with his body in a trash barrel and his belongings strewn along the highway. Ultimately, no one was caught. Pennsylvania State Police Trooper Jay Musser, who worked the case from its opening day, would later say in the 2023 HBO documentary Last Call that investigators never even followed up at the Townhouse Bar. Musser said that in hindsight it probably would have been a good idea, but at the time they didn't know it was a gay bar, didn't know anything about the community, and had considered that information to be irrelevant. All they knew, he said, was that they had a body.
I mean, victimology tells you that no detail is truly irrelevant, but particularly where they were, what type of lifestyle they were living, were they upper class, everything is relevant. Everything is relevant.
Yeah.
But I would definitely argue that sexuality and hanging out at a gay bar is 100% relevant for victim. What? Okay. Remind me the year.
1991.
Taking me to the 1900s.
Taking you back to your heyday.
Yeah.
When you were working as a can-can dancer.
Excuse me, I haven't done that since the 1800s.
Since you were at the Tuna Saluna?
Yeah, Tuna Saluna during the Civil War.
Entertaining Abraham. And his man friends.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, well, maybe hanging out with his beard.
That single word, irrelevant, what automatically?
I love it.
Not ultimately, not automatically.
Automatically, I love it.
The single word irrelevant would ultimately become the kind of thematic through line of this series of cases. The identity of the victim and the world he inhabited were treated as irrelevant. And because they were treated as irrelevant, the man who killed Peter Anderson was free to kill again and again and again.
Not only is it not irrelevant, but it's also just as unlikely that if they would have gone into these spaces and tried talking to people, the people would not have been receptive to them or would not have shared information with investigators because they would know that that's not a safe space for them. Like, it's not irrelevant, but I don't know that they would have gotten any information if they had gone to those spaces, but we'll never know because they didn't go to those spaces because, oh, well, gosh, the location that our victim was last known at, why would we ever want to know that information? That's so stupid.
Mm-hmm. I agree. To better understand why the murders of 4 men across 3 states went unsolved for nearly a decade, we first need to understand New York City in the early 1990s. We need to understand 3 converging factors that created what amounted to a zone of invisibility around an entire community. The first force was sheer violence. In 1990, New York City recorded approximately 2,245 homicides, the highest number in the city's modern history. The crack epidemic had detonated across neighborhoods in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, and Upper Manhattan, turning entire blocks into open-air drug markets ringed by gunfire. Between 1990 and 1993, the city averaged roughly 6 murders a day. Detectives carried crushing caseloads. Every squad was overwhelmed. Homicides involving unidentified victims, dismembered remains, or bodies found far from the site of death, which were the exact characteristics of the last call murders, were the kind that fell to the bottom of the pile. Not because detectives didn't care, but because the sheer arithmetic of the crisis made triage inevitable. The second force was the AIDS epidemic. By March 1992, nearly 38,000 cases of AIDS had been reported in the New York City metropolitan area alone. This accounted for roughly 17.6% of all adult AIDS cases nationwide. The gay community was in a state of sustained catastrophe. Entire social networks were disintegrating. Funerals were constant. Hospitals like St. Vincent's in Greenwich Village had become the de facto hospice. Organizations like the Gay Men's Health Crisis, founded in 1981, and the confrontational direct action group ACT UP, founded in 1987, were waging a war on multiple fronts. Against the virus itself, against pharmaceutical companies that withheld treatment, and against a government that, in the community's view, had left them to die. Thanks, Ronald and Nancy fucking Reagan. Sorry, not a political podcast.
Wow. If you could please, this is the second dead president that you have brought up. You could just...
Gotta lay off of him a little bit, I suppose.
You gotta lay off these Republicans.
I can't lay off Ronald. What a fucking piece of shit.
Well, also, they love to be like, Lincoln was a Republican. And it's like, yeah, but that was when the values, the ideologies of the parties had been opposite. They flipped. And anyway, not a political podcast. Gosh, I'd really hate for anybody to listen and think that, oh, we just can't not be political.
The AIDS epidemic didn't just kill people. It fundamentally altered the social calculus of gay life in New York. Men who might have once been visible, who might have reported crimes, who might have cooperated with police, who might have demanded investigations, weren't just dying, they were retreating. The closet, which the liberation movement of the 1970s had begun to dismantle, was reasserting itself. The epidemic had reattached shame to identity. If you were a gay man who was assaulted, robbed, or attacked, reporting that crime meant disclosing your sexuality to a police department that had, within living memory, raided your bars and arrested you for existing. The cost of seeking help was often higher than the cost of staying silent. That's right, Benji.
Benji is pissed.
Benji, he's not having it. He said, not with my two dads. not with these two queers.
Oh, God.
The third force was institutional homophobia. Not as an abstraction, but as a policy. The New York City Anti-Violence Project, or AVP, had been founded in 1980 in the streets of Chelsea by community activists responding to a series of brutal attacks against gay men. By the early 1990s, AVP was documenting an alarming spike in anti-gay hate crimes. In 1990 alone, 2 murders galvanized the community. The killing of Julio Rivera, beaten to death in a Queens schoolyard for being gay, and the murder of Jimmy Zappa-Lordy, a Vietnam War veteran stabbed on Staten Island because he was gay. And the NYPD's response to these crimes and to the broader pattern of anti-gay violence was at best inconsistent. The HBO documentary Last Call notes that Commissioner Raymond Kelly was a member of the Emerald Society, an organization within the NYPD that was openly hostile to LGBTQ inclusion. The relationship between the queer community and the law enforcement in New York was not merely strained, it had become adversarial. This was a city where, within the preceding 2 decades, police had routinely raided gay bars, arrested patrons for sodomy, and treated homosexuality as a de facto criminal status.
Yep, Benji hates sodomy charges as well.
He's so progressive.
It's such a... Why?
Sorry.
Okay. Progressive. Okay. I don't know. The sodomy thing, it gets me to go down a rabbit's hole. Well,
not a rabbit's hole. Not a poor rabbit's hole.
You took it there.
Not sodomy.
Yeah.
Hold on. Andrew's like, I don't know why this dog is barking.
Tell him it's because of sodomy. Tell him that he's mad about New York City in the early 90s.
Andrew laughed at Benji at being mad about anti-sodomy laws.
Well, I'm glad he liked that joke, because it's not going to be the last time he hears it.
Okay, now I hear my husband yelling. Give me a minute. I'm back. So, turns out they were yelling at the FedEx man.
What do you mean they?
Well, that's why Benji started barking, because the FedEx man was here.
Yeah.
Andrew had his earphones in. He didn't hear the man knock, but he heard the dog bark. Okay, I'm ready to continue. Are you ready?
Yes.
Also, to just provide a little more context, again, this kind of living history was still occurring in New York. The Stonewall Uprising had just happened in 1969, something that was in the recent memory of the memories of many of these older gay men who would frequent this piano bar.
And we covered that case on a previous episode.
Did we really?
Yeah, Marsha P. Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Hey, give me just a second. My stomach is hurting. Have you ever had a baby guava?
No.
So last weekend I got baby guavas, and I've had them before, but only like twice. And it was never like, I ordered a bag from Sam's. So like, a huge bag of baby guavas. And last weekend I was like, oh, these are so tasty. And so I ate 16 of them in a course of a day. And they're literally like maybe the size of a cherry tomato, maybe a little bigger.
Okay.
But I learned that each one of them has 3 to 4 grams of fiber. And so in one day, I consumed close to like 70 grams of fiber. And all this last week, I've had like crazy constipation.
Oh. Yeah,
like way too much fiber. And my body was like, what the fuck do you want me to do with this? Right. And so I drank more water than normal, more fluid than normal. And like by Wednesday, I was pretty okay. And I was like, I still have this huge bag of guava. And so I ate some more, but not nearly as many. And like kind of been doing the same thing. And my pooping is kind of getting to a normal place. But that's okay. I'm glad I have a bidet because I fucking power wash that shit. Literally. I'm ready. I'm ready to keep going if you are.
And just to be clear, you want me to edit that out or?
You can leave in whatever you want, baby. If people want to know about my fiber intake, if they want to know about the dangers of baby guava, be my guest.
Honestly, I think it's important information to share.
Yeah, be careful with baby guava. They are soft, they're sweet, they're delicious. Do not eat them if they are unripe because they can further exacerbate the issue of constipation. Because unripened, they're high in tannins. Tannins slow down the digestive process. They make the colon and the small intestines react weakly. And so they're not as good at pushing it out. And so there are lots of potential pitfalls of consuming baby guavas if you are not careful.
Guava responsibly.
Yeah, be careful with those baby G's. They'll get you. They'll get you. So yeah, they're more high in fiber per gram or per. Okay. They are richer in fiber per gram than raspberries, and raspberries are considered one of the highest fiber fruits. It's the one that most people are familiar with because it's most commonly available and high in fiber. And so it's a real trick. And baby guavas are a rich source of both soluble and insoluble fiber. So Cameron listeners, whoever is hearing what, just know baby guavas are good for you, but you should be careful.
Everything in moderation.
Everything. Except this podcast. Download, listen, and stream all episodes now.
Could you imagine binging us?
Whoa. What's so crazy is I'll gladly do that with a new podcast I find. It's hard to imagine anyone would do that.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you're listening and you're here, will you let us know if you've ever binged us? Like, did you listen to multiple episodes at once, or did you discover us and then you were like, oh, cool, let me listen to like the last 15 episodes over the next 15 days of my commute? I'm so curious to know. Anderson's case went cold. Investigators had recovered fingerprints from the trash bags using something I've never heard of, or at least I'm not aware of that I've heard of. Cyanolacrylate fuming. Are you familiar?
No.
Oh. It's a technique that heats super glue so its vapors react with fingerprint residues and form a visible white polymer. However, these fingerprints that were recovered matched no one in any database. 14 months later, on July 10th, 1992, sanitation workers found a head in a trash barrel in a rest area along Route 72 in Burlington County, New Jersey, and then more remains turned up hours later at a separate rest stop in Ocean County. The victim, who had been cut into 7 pieces, dead from multiple stab wounds, was identified as Thomas... Why are you laughing?
You said that the victim had been cut into 7 pieces and then said dead as if that was not implied.
Sorry. I guess I maybe should have phrased it differently. He died by several stab wounds before being dismembered.
Yeah. I mean, you could be cut into 7 pieces and still survive. Just pop off 6 of the fingers.
Yeah.
Or toes.
Mm-hmm.
3 and 3.
You could lose both of your ears, your nose, some fingers, some toes. We'd get there pretty quickly.
I take it back. He was cut into 7 pieces and died.
You could also cut your toes and then you could cut the hands off.
Start with the toes so that you can actually... Otherwise, if you start with the hands, then you can't do the toes. If you're doing it on your own.
Well, I'm not doing this to me.
Oh.
What are you... I'm not doing this at all.
I live alone. I do most things alone.
How do you think, how hard?
Don't ask me how I think.
If you had a meat cleaver, could you chop off someone's hand?
Me?
Not you specifically. I just mean, do you think that's possible? Okay, I've got a meat cleaver. I put Andrew's hand on the counter, and then I just, does it cut it off?
Andrew,
does it
get
go
out
through the bone?
now.
I would never do that to the love of my life. But I'm just using him as an example.
I think...
If I took hand and put it on the table... bleep, bleep.
No.
Yes.
You're going to listen back and you'll be like, what?
Would it go through? Is there, I know that we obviously have bones and then tissues that connect, but I feel like the wrist is so flexible.
Yeah, but I think the bone, it's got quite a few bones up in there. On the hands is the...
Carpals?
Right, because carpal tunnel. But then that also feels wrong. It feels wrong.
I think you're right. I took vertebrate zoology. I feel like I should know, but I don't.
I was raised by a physical therapist.
That you were.
I should definitely
a doctor of physical therapy.
She wasn't a doctor when she was raising me.
Wow. Would you stop shaming your mother this way on the pod?
Shaming? She got her doctorate in 2012.
Either way, Candy's a It's not your fault you didn't learn.
Beep.
Oh, sorry. Beep!
I'm gonna bleep where you said badass.
Great.
I think that it is possible. I don't know that you or I could do it, but maybe the strongest man in the world or something could slice and dice straight through.
Yeah.
Maybe a butcher.
Maybe.
They're gonna know. They're gonna know how much force they need to use.
Yeah.
Should I go get my meat cleaver?
No, it's okay. Actually, we don't... This isn't Mythbusters. We're supposed to be filled with conjecture. Okay. So dead from multiple stab wounds was identified as Thomas Richard Mulcahy, a 57-year-old man, a married father of 4 from Sudbury, Massachusetts. Mulcahy worked in computer equipment sales and had been educated at Boston College and Fordham. The Boston Globe described him as a man whose compassion caused him to cry while watching violence on the evening news. Mulcahy had visited New York on business. He was a man who, when he traveled, would add an extra day to his trip. He would visit the Townhouse Bar, the same bar where Anderson had been last seen alive. Mulcahy was married to a woman named Margaret, and his children adored him. He was also bisexual, and like many men of his generation, he navigated that identity privately, compartmentalizing his public life in Massachusetts from the hours he spent in Manhattan's piano bars. His credit card records placed him at the townhouse on the evening of July 8th. He was last seen leaving. At his funeral, at Our Lady of Fatima Church in Sudbury, Mulcahy's daughter Tracy spoke. "It is ironic," she said, "that someone filled with so much love was taken from us in a crime by someone filled with so much hate." I didn't do much digging into if this death and the revelations that came from it did any kind of or caused any kind of hurt to the family unit. But I do think it's worth discussing just briefly the stigma that was attached to being queer, even in the early 1990s, and how that could force a man to explore his sexuality outside the confines of his normal life. New Jersey investigators recognized the pattern and submitted a...
I thought you were wanting to talk about something.
Oh, just the difficulty of exploring one's sexuality at that time.
In a lot of ways, there's still a stigma, but I think it's like the locations where the stigma lives are shrinking. But, I mean, the early 2000s... You have to assume that a decade before the early 2000s, where there was a lot of stigma surrounding just gay men. I don't even think that... I know that bisexuals have, of course, existed throughout time, but I don't think that the conversation about bisexuals has really come into, I don't know, more common spaces, common conversations about it until relatively recently. I mean, within probably the past 10 years.
Well, I mean, I think part of that is that as a society, very reductively, we have decided that bisexual people can't exist.
Right.
You're either gay and you just don't know it or don't accept it, or you're straight and you're just experimenting.
Right.
Or, messing around. And there
All right.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
I can't totally remember what I was saying.
We're talking about society being reductive about bisexuals existing.
And this kind of erasure of bisexuality, I know that I was even guilty of it at a certain point, Very much an attitude of, this boy is gay.
Right.
I think that still happens a lot, both in the straight and queer communities. We have a hard time reconciling bisexuality. Not for women, but I think that women also get it in kind of a more negative way in terms of we have this huge swath of the straight male population, and even sometimes the female population, that thinks, oh, she just hasn't found the right man. And I think about how straight men do that with lesbians, not just bisexual women, but lesbians. And I'm like, why do you think that? I don't know. It's so exclusionary and it's so reductive, and it forces this kind of perspective that, and this is something I used to be guilty of too, right? Especially coming from a religious upbringing. This idea that if you could choose to be with only the opposite sex, why would you put yourself through the distress of being with someone of the same sex? Why would you not just choose to socially acquiesce? Why would you not make the decision to be quote unquote normal? And so I think that thinking still persists. I think we still see it in mainstream society, although I do think it's falling away a little bit. I think eventually we're going to get to a point where most people are some flavor of bisexual, omnisexual, pansexual. I digress.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there are a lot of ways in which the bi erasure is more prevalent in, I don't know, I'm just unfamiliar with the lesbian community, but in the gay community. And I think probably because if you're bi, like more than in comparison to the straight community, because I think that in particular a lot of people who are quote unquote straight to an extent they can identify with being interested in experiencing romantic encounters with people of the same sex, even if at the end of the day they ultimately marry somebody of the opposite sex. God. Okay. I just feel like there are so many conversations to be open. But they don't, because from my understanding, in a limited perspective of a community to which I do not belong, I have heard people who are bi talk about how people who are gay are less accepting of people who are bi. And I think that there's probably an aspect of what you said earlier, the idea that they must just not be okay with the fact that they're gay. And also because there is a situation in which you can be straight presenting and you don't have to necessarily go through the same adversarial issues that somebody who is gay does, right? There's no way around it. There's no world unless, like you said, you're just pretending to be quote unquote normal, then there is no space for you to, I don't know, get the same grace that somebody who is bi, who's in a relationship with somebody of the opposite sex gets. But then there's erasure in that as well, because if there's a woman who's bi and she marries a man, then people are like, oh, well, you're straight. But she's not straight. She's still bi. Her sexuality hasn't changed. She's just chosen to spend her life with a male partner.
Which, in and of itself, still inside, right, feels like a betrayal to queerness, to the spaces that you used to fill, to the identity you used to proclaim. And maybe none of those things actually change when you enter into a heterosexual relationship as a bisexual person. But it feels like, okay, so you were only queer up to a certain extent. It's really unfair. There's a lot of it that feels, and I think that your assessment's really accurate. I think that, it's why the term lugs exist, which just means lesbian until graduation, right? Oh, you're in college?
Sure.
And then you're a lesbian until, oh, I graduated, I found a husband, I'm settling down, right?
Right.
There are all these different mechanisms to diminish someone's bisexuality. And I don't know. I don't know ultimately what I hoped to gain out of this conversation, other than to demonstrate that bisexual people are real. They should be allowed to experience whatever that bisexuality is to them. And if it's not your business, don't concern yourself with it.
We see you. And they have a cute flag, right?
Oh, yeah. It's cute. It's cute. I think it's
purple.
Yeah. Purple, pink, and blue.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Almost similar to the trans flag, except no white.
Which is the one that's purple and white and black?
Oh, listen, we're getting into some territory that I don't know. I think the lesbian flag is shades of pink and orange.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's asexual. Black, gray, white, and purple.
I don't know why purple's in there.
Okay.
I'll tell you this. I can understand bisexuality a lot better than I can still understand asexuality, which I still accept and respect. But it's kind of like, I think just from my perspective, I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? But I very much know that it exists. I think it would be really neat to not have any kind of sexual feelings, because as a young adult, so much time is spent thinking, at least it was for me, right? And then even beyond, like this, it's, oh, what freedom? Like, is that where people get the time to build Legos? Is that where people, like, do you know what I think
I do hear what you're saying, yeah.
I think I've only known 2 people who identified as asexual. And I'll be honest, those people are really fierce. They're good at getting shit done. And, wow. Okay, you know what? Scratch all this talk about asexuality. I sound like a crazy, evil person. And instead, just mad respect. Mad respect to the asexual community. If you're asexual and listening, love you.
I don't think you sound crazy or evil. I hear what you're saying. You're saying that And we know this to be true, right? That there's so much talk about when boys are going through puberty, how all their body is telling them to do is procreate. And then there are so many conversations about how, oh, men think about sex every 7 seconds in a day and right? So it makes sense that if your experience is not the asexual experience, that it would be hard to wrap your mind around that. And obviously, the statistic is not that they think about it every 7 seconds, but the amount of time spent thinking on it when you divide it out over the day, it comes to every 7 seconds.
That's so wild.
It's not like, okay, I'm doing this spreadsheet, sex.
Spread on sheets?
That was so sibling rivalry coded.
Oh, yeah, I could see that. Very peppermint coded when she's...
Yeah. Oh, the little video.
Race?
Yeah, Peppermint and Bob and Mateo.
Yeah. That's... Okay, first off, fortunately, I'm asexual enough to not be having that kind of thoughts about sexuality or things related to it.
Sure.
But it's don't women hit their sexual peak in their mid to late 20s?
I think it's 30s.
30s?
I think it's 30s.
Talk about incongruence.
Right. Hence.
Cougar.
Yeah.
Cougar Town.
Okay. We
have really diverged from the topic at hand. All of that to say, all are welcome here. We see you, we support you, we love you. And just know, whatever your journey looks like, I'm supporting it. So if that's polycules, if that's demisexuality, if that's pansexuality, if that's hetero-romantic, homosexual, the inverse, if they match, whatever. Cameron and I love it in all flavors.
Whoa.
And all.
You're speaking for me, and all I'm thinking of is the 62 million hits in February on the Rape Your Wife site. So
okay,
I'm not going to support everybody. Also, pedophilia. Look.
Oh, okay. Well, my God. Obvious restraints. Obvious parameters to what I'm saying. We're not welcoming non-consensual sex.
If it's legal between two consenting adults.
Adults.
Yes.
And for me, I'm going to say 18 up. I don't care what your local government says. 18 and up. I think in Germany, people can start having sex at 16, like with people of any age. Is that right?
I don't know.
Someone told me that Germany was the Alabama of Europe, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about that.
You're the German one here.
Germanic roots. Let's watch out with the German one. 9. The Mulcahy scene yielded traceable evidence. Plastic gloves were traced by SKU. Is that how they pronounce SKU? I know it's all capitalized. It's probably some initialism, but...
Nope, SKU.
To a CVS on Staten Island. A sticker on a keyhole saw led to a Pergament hardware store directly across from that CVS.
What are you saying? A keyhole saw?
Yes.
A saw for a keyhole?
I don't know what a keyhole saw is, but I know that's what it is. So a sticker on a keyhole saw led to a Pergament hardware store, and I think Pergament is like a proper name for the hardware store, directly across the street from the CVS. The body had been separated at the joints, which is a technique called disarticulation, which requires precise anatomical knowledge, and told investigators that they were looking for someone with medical training. DNA from the gloves was entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, produced no match. On May 6th, 1993, Anthony Edward Marrero, 44, disappeared near Midtown Manhattan. Puerto Rican born, Marrero was one of the 7 children of a poor family. He had spent his youth in the Philadelphia area before moving to New York, where he worked as a sex worker around the Port Authority bus terminal. His older brother, interviewed by HBO decades later, spoke lovingly of how Anthony had dressed like John Travolta in his youth, though the brother refused to believe Anthony was gay. His dismembered remains were found the next day along a dirt road in Manchester Township, New Jersey. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds. New York Daily News columnist Mike McAlery gave the unknown killer a name, the Last Call Killer, after the traditional announcement bartenders made before closing. Less than 3 months later, on July 29, 1993, Michael J. Sakura spent the evening at the Five Oaks Piano Bar in Greenwich Village. Sakura was 56, openly gay, and worked as a typesetter for the New York Law Journal. He had originally been from Philadelphia and had served in the military before being discharged for his sexuality. Boo! Unlike Anderson and Mulcahy, Sakura was not closeted. He was, by all accounts, the most comfortable in his own skin of any of the victims. He was a regular at the Five Oaks. Tall, friendly, regal. He also liked to sing "I'll Be Seeing You" as the night wound down. Bartender Lisa Hall noticed a white male sit next to Sakura around 3 a.m. Sakura introduced the man as a nurse at St. Vincent's Hospital. The man had been drinking scotch and water, and later, Sakura accepted a ride from him.
Did you say how old Sakura is?
56.
And the man that was having scotch and water, was he younger?
I don't describe that here.
I know, but I've just been guessing.
Well, you keep guessing. The next day, Sakura's belongings turned up at an overlook at Haverstraw Bay in Rockland County. A hot dog vendor found his head and arms in bags at a nearby trash barrel. His remaining body parts were recovered 10 miles away 9 days later. Unlike the other victims, Sakura had been both bludgeoned and stabbed. Across these 4 killings, a pattern starts to become recognizable. What the FBI might call a modus operandi, or what we might refer to as an MO, kind of creating this consistent signature. The MO is functional. The perpetrator would lure victims from bars, likely sedate them, kill by stabbing, dismember with anatomical precision, wrap remains in bags, transport to highways. The signature is the disposal itself, placing human remains in trash at rest stops like refuse. Whether conscious or not, it communicated contempt. It suggests a killer harboring deep ambivalence, possibly self-loathing, toward the community he himself belonged to, as investigators would eventually learn. Any thoughts or suggestions or questions on that bit?
Last time I asked a question, I was shut down.
Twat.
No, I mean, ever since you said that the first victim was 57, it was, 57, 54?
Marrero was...
53?
Marrero was the kind of like off-cast. He was only 44.
Yeah, but that was the third victim you said.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yes, 54.
Okay, 54, 44, and then 56. So once you said that, I was trying to think of who would be responsible for this, and I mean, 9 times out of 10, you can assume that it's a white guy who blends and is not necessarily stand out in any way. And I would think probably mid to late 20s, possibly early 30s. If he was younger than that, if he was early 20s, then definitely he's looking for... You said that the 4th victim was the one who was the most accepting of his sexuality and his openness about it. So obviously this is a predator who is looking for men who are going to want to be a little bit more discreet. And probably after the 3rd victim, he's building his own confidence. And so he's willing to go for somebody who's less focused on being discreet.
Obviously gay.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I've just been trying to profile.
No, you're doing a great job.
0 training. Every time you've said a victim and their age, that's been like what I'm thinking. And then the next victim with their age, it kind of confirms. And then, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's all I'm really thinking about. I don't know that I have anything else. Maybe I'm pulling what you felt like you were doing in our last episode, and you're wanting me to go one way, and I'm just like, pew!
No, you're doing great. You're doing great. I wanted you to kind of use your skills, your knowledge set. A multi-state task force formed in 1993. Composite sketches were distributed, and an anonymous tip in August described a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital who had lured a man from a bar and tried to tie him up. Detectives pulled photos of male nurses at Mount Sinai living on Staten Island and showed them to Lisa Hall. She thought one had similar hair to the man she'd seen with Sakura, but couldn't make a positive ID. Consequently, investigators moved on. The NYPD did not pursue it further. Author Elon Green would later conclude that the NYPD didn't pay attention to it as much as they should have, though the New Jersey police remained very attentive. The person who kept the case alive was Margaret Mulcahy, Thomas's widow. Margaret hired a private investigator, and she pressured authorities. She refused to let her husband become a forgotten name in an unsolved file. Her persistence would eventually play a direct role in reigniting the investigation.
The other thought that I'm having is that this is one of those cases that has been replicated on Law & Order SVU.
Okay.
I mean, pretty much all of the same details.
Really? Interesting. I didn't know it had been turned into an SVU episode.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence that would be presented at the eventual trial showed that after Sakura's murder, the killer stopped visiting the bars altogether. And when he returned, he offered different explanations for his absence, telling one acquaintance that he had moved to Florida, another that his work schedule had changed. This behavioral shift, what criminologists usually refer to as a cooling-off period, is significant. It demonstrates the self-preserving rationality of an organized offender. The killings were not compulsive. This was someone who could stop. Whether he truly stopped or merely shifted his hunting grounds remains an open question. Ultimately, years passed, the case files sat, and the killer's name remained unknown.
You know, I'm sure you do know this, but I'll just say it for the sake of saying it. The cooling off period is one of the things required for somebody to be considered a serial killer. They have to have the cooling off period. They have to have 3 or more victims with a cooling off period in between. And then usually the cooling off period kind of shortens and the murders become more frequent. Again, it's with confidence, with not getting caught. It's
those windows become progressively smaller, correct?
Right.
I might have known that, but I didn't remember it. I didn't know where you were going, so...
I never know where I'm going.
Is that how you ended up in the UK?
I don't know how I ended up anywhere.
Fair enough.
I just buckle in and I'll hang on.
You ended up in one place because I said, hey, come live here and work with me. And see? I'm genuinely so sorry for that.
Genuinely?
Genuinely very sorry about that. Although it brought us closer together, so not sorry about that part.
I think had I not gone there, I don't know that we would be doing this podcast.
Right. The breakthrough came from chemistry. In 1999, New Jersey investigators learned of vacuum metal deposition, or what's often shortened to VMD. This technique deposits thin layers of gold and then zinc onto evidence inside of a vacuum chamber. The zinc cannot settle on oily fingerprint residues, producing a negative image of the print. Unlike cyanacrylate fuming, VMD can recover prints that are years old, that have been wetted, and that sit on flexible plastic. The exact material...
Sorry. Do you have to be a secretor?
I don't know. The exact material that had thwarted investigators. I don't know if that has to be from a secretor or not. Gloves and more than 36 bags from the crime scenes were sent to the Toronto Police Department, one of the few North American labs with VMD capability. 6 months later, Toronto returned 35 latent fingerprints and several palm prints. They were mailed to all 50 states for comparisons against each state's AFIS, or Automated Fingerprint Identification System database. Now, not all states had fully digitized their records, so the process could and ended up being painstaking for a few areas. In May 2001, Maine's APHIS went online for the first time. Among its records were the prints of a man booked into the All right, I knew this word was going to fuck me up when I wrote it down. Booked into the Penobscot, so it looks like Pen-O-B Scott. So Penobscot County Jail in 1973 for killing his roommate. A man who had confessed to the killing stood trial and had been acquitted. Those prints, taken 28 years earlier during a routine booking procedure by an Orono police officer who could not have known what he was preserving, matched the prints pulled from the plastic bags. The specificity was devastating. 16 of the Mulcahy prints matched. 2 Marrero prints and a palm print matched. 18 Anderson prints and a palm print matched. There was no ambiguity. Ocean County prosecutor William Heisler would later tell the New York Times, "They said, we got him." The name was Richard Westall Rogers Jr. He was 50 years old, a registered nurse at the Mount Sinai Medical Center, and a resident of Staten Island.
He's much older than I guessed.
He had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Now that you have the name, I want to go back. Rogers was born June 16th, 1950 in Massachusetts. Quiet, meticulous, and solitary. Rogers was a straight-A student. He graduated from Florida Southern College with a degree in French in 1972, and then enrolled as a graduate student at the University of Maine in Orono. His roommate there was Frederick Allen Spencer, a 22-year-old man who was a graduate student in entomology. On April 28, 1973, Rogers struck Spencer 8 times in the back of his head, with a roofing hammer. When Spencer survived the bludgeoning, Rogers placed a plastic bag over his head and suffocated him. He waited until dark, wrapped the body in a nylon tent, and then dumped it in the forest off Route 116. Police found blood, fingerprints, and the hammer inside Rogers' room, to which he then confessed. I want to let that sequence settle. 8 blows to the back of the skull, followed by asphyxiation. Not self-defense, right? We don't strike someone 8 times from behind while defending ourselves in a frontal attack. The use of a secondary killing method, the bag, suggests that Rogers was composed enough after delivering these 8 hammer blows to apply sustained pressure until death occurred. This was a controlled and sequential act of violence. However, and I'm sure you'll never guess how Rogers got out of this, he claimed self-defense and deployed what is now called the gay panic defense.
My guess was he's gay.
Mm-hmm. The argument that an unwanted homosexual advance constitutes sufficient provocation for lethal violence. In 1973, this was a commonly accepted legal strategy. Rogers testified with remarkable composure. He was calm, he was clear, he was convincing, and his attorney, Errol K. Payne, successfully petitioned to reduce the murder charge to manslaughter. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours and chose to acquit him. However, all of that being said, the state of Maine kept his fingerprints on file. Frederick Spencer's former high school girlfriend, Jenny Riley, would later tell HBO, "To think that had this killer been convicted in 1973, so many other men might not have suffered the same fate." Rogers' college roommate Don Cubberly would later describe him as, quote, "wound tight, with a closet organized with military precision." This degree of environmental control is also frequently observed in organized offenders. Individuals who plan their crimes, manage risk carefully, and take deliberate steps to avoid detection. Ultimately, in his later crimes, Roger would demonstrate all of these traits.
So he didn't start killing until he was in his late 40s?
Other than the one instance, yeah.
Right, but I mean, with the serial murder, with the MO, so what happened? What happened in his 40s? Did somebody die? Did he get divorced? What happened to set him off to commit the crimes.
So I have a couple of more paragraphs just kind of describing him pre-murders. And we'll see if that gives any insight.
Okay.
After his acquittal, Rogers moved to New York, earned a nursing degree from Pace University, and in 1979 began a 22-year career at Mount Sinai, working in cardiac care, the operating room, and the pediatric ICU, caring for children with heart ailments. Colleagues described him as dependable and gentle. This is what some forensic psychologists refer to as compartmentalization, the ability to maintain separate psychological domains for different aspects of life. His nursing expertise gave him access to sedatives like midazolam, a benzodiazepine sold as Versed that induces sedation and amnesia, and the anatomical training to disarticulate human remains with clinical precision. And
do you think part of compartmentalization, looking at it from a 2026 lens, is maybe also just masking?
I think of it as being a trauma response, and I also think of it as potentially being masking, yeah.
Yeah, I think probably both. If there was no inciting incident that then resulted in that, or traumatic childhood, or whatever the case may be, I'm thinking that it could also just be a masking technique.
I agree. In 1980... Sorry, why are you laughing?
Because you just do that sometimes. You're like, yes, agree. Moving
I do agree.
on.
Like, I think you said something insightful. I think that we can see compartmentalization as masking. I think the real question comes into play. The differentiator is, what is the intent? What is the purpose? What is the conscious level of behavior, right? I can compartmentalize without it being masking. I do compartmentalize without it being masking. But I think for some people, their form of masking is compartmentalization.
Yeah.
And they don't understand there's a connection there. And so I agree with what you're saying. I don't think it's universal, but I think that...
I think both exist, but I think when I'm talking about some things that happened in the 90s was...
For you personally?
For me personally? Well, that too. But in your case...
Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just thinking that probably in the 90s, I don't even think with autism necessarily you would have that language of masking. Mm-mm. So I guess that's what I'm thinking is looking at it now. Yes, compartmentalization is a thing, but masking is also a thing that would not have been considered at the time because it was not terminology that was either used regularly or it may not have even been something that was identified yet as a symptom of autism.
We've really, the train left the station and
see,
we didn't get off at our stop. In 1988, a man named Sandy Harrow reported that Rogers had drugged him with spiked orange juice and tied him to a bed. Rogers was charged with unlawful imprisonment and acquitted again at a non-jury trial. 15 months later, Peter Anderson was dead. As the HBO documentary's executive producer Howard Gertler put it, this is someone who should have never been out on the streets. On May 27, 2001, NYPD officers approached Rogers during a shift at Mount Sinai and told him he was a credit card fraud victim and asked him to headquarters. New Jersey investigators had been surveilling him for 3 weeks, hoping he'd lead them to whatever location he used to dismember his victims, the so-called murder factory. But the NYPD, upon learning their suspect worked at the hospital, where Mayor Giuliani's mother was being treated, arrested him immediately, cutting the surveillance short. The quote murder factory was never found. Thanks, Rudy Giuliani. As astonished colleagues in the pediatric ICU looked on, Rogers was led away in handcuffs. Co-workers had known him only as a well-adjusted man who was hardworking and dependable. His neighbor, Robert Roldan, told the New York Daily News that Richard was the kind of neighbor everyone wished to have. A pianist at a bar he frequented described him as delicate, soft, someone who enjoyed discussing musical theater. In the interrogation room, Rogers acknowledged recognizing Sakura from the Five Oaks. When told his fingerprints were on the bag, he requested a lawyer and stopped talking. He was held on a $1 million bail. A search of his immaculately organized condominium at 62 Bridge Court on Staten Island yielded a syringe, a vial of Versed, a Bible with passages about dismemberment highlighted, a New Jersey road map, Polaroid photographs of shirtless men, apparently construction workers photographed through his window, on which Rogers had drawn stab wounds with a marker, carpet fibers matching those on Mulcahy, and plastic bags consistent with those from the crime scenes. The Polaroids are the most psychologically revealing evidence. Drawing stab wounds on photographs of living men is a form of what we refer to as rehearsal behavior, a pattern in forensic psychology. Why are you laughing? Are you laughing at my hand motions?
The way you said it was like, say it with me, class, like we were in pre-K.
Can you say rehearsal
behavior?
That's right. Good job. Rehearsal behavior. A pattern in forensic psychology where an offender practices violence through fantasy. Combined with the highlighted biblical passages, the evidence suggests a man who had constructed an internal world in which violence was ritualistically meaningful. Rogers' trial began October 26, 2005 in Toms River, New Jersey. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Mulcahy and Marrero. He was offered a plea, manslaughter, with parole eligibility after 15 years. However, he declined. Judge James Sitta ruled that evidence from the Anderson and Sacre cases could be presented to show identity, opportunity, intent, and plan. Prosecutor William Heisler opened with the fingerprint evidence. Thomas Mulcahy, again 16 prints from 9 fingers. Anthony Marrero, 2 prints on the bag containing his head and a palm print. Peter Anderson, 17 prints and a palm print. And Michael Sacre, dead 27 hours after being seen with the defendant. Rogers did not testify on his own behalf, and his team called no witnesses. His defense attorney acknowledged in his opening that there was little in the prosecutor's presentation that he challenged or disagreed with. The only question, he said, was whether Rogers had committed the murders. The jury deliberated fewer than 4 hours, and on November 10, 2005, he was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of hindering apprehension. He showed no reaction as the weeping forewoman read the verdict. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, a minimum of 65 years. Rogers has never spoken publicly about the murders. He has never offered an explanation, an apology, or a motive. In a 2003 letter to a friend from jail, he wrote that investigators had found DNA on the victims that didn't match his, and that they hadn't found any evidence of a crime scene in his house or apartment, a statement that revealed less about the evidence than about the clinical detachment of the man who wrote it. He is currently housed at the New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, and he is 75 years old. Elon Green identified the true significance of the case's resolution. The hero of the story, he said, is the person who took Rogers' fingerprints in 1973. Because if they hadn't had been these beautiful and articulated prints, the VMD technology would have never mattered, and this case would have never been solved. I have more to say, but I want to give you an opportunity to say something if you need to.
I don't know that I have much to say in this concluding portion. I mean, you've kind of said it, right? The fact that he was acquitted twice when he was acquitted for the first murder, and he was acquitted for tying the guy up. And the murder, we know that he used the gay panic defense, which would have been accepted as a reasonable defense. And then going all the way back to the beginning of the case where where the investigators weren't going into the last known location of the victim and felt like it was irrelevant that he was in a gay bar, which, again, not irrelevant, but it just reiterates the point that we discussed earlier, where this guy who was drugged and tied up who was, I mean, for all intents and purposes, kidnapped and held against his will, was punished for coming forward and speaking about this, probably because of the way that he would have ended up in the situation, right? Like, why were you in a position for him to give you the orange juice that was spiked with which he drugged you? Well, you were going with him to engage in what potentially a hookup, and you're gay, so we're not going to give you the satisfaction you, in essence, like, you asked for this because you live this alternative lifestyle. And I mean, that was just 80s, 90s, early 2000s even. That was kind of the mentality, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Certainly before then, but also illegal. So
wow. Even sadder when you lay it out just like that.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, it's important. The 4 victims that are mentioned in this story really and truly encompass a singular cautionary tale, a message that this is what happens when a community is told and shown by action and inaction alike that its members do not matter. Rogers is still suspected of additional unsolved killings, such as that of Matthew John Piero, 21, found dead near a gay bar in Orlando in 1982, the murder of Jack Franklin Andrews, whose remains appeared in bags at a Connecticut rest stop in 1986. Investigators believe Rogers killed when he traveled, meticulously saving paid time off to vacation across the country. This verdict did bring relief to the families, but not the kind of relief that heals. Tracy Mulcahy called it an emotional release. Matt Foreman of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force said that it felt like justice denied. It took so long, it wasn't as gratifying as it should have been. B. Hansen of the Anti-Violence Project said, "We have to take the victories we have, but this is happening again, and we've come full circle." Elon Green, who ultimately wrote the book Last Call, did not set out to profile a killer, but to tell the stories of an overlooked generation of gay men who were just on the cusp of being able to live the lives they wanted. Peter Anderson was HIV positive, involved in politics, and was incredibly enthusiastic about life. Thomas Mulcahy was a loving father who wept at the news. And Anthony Marrero survived poverty and dressed like Travolta, while Michael Sacra had served in the military before being discharged for his sexuality and often saying, "I'll be seeing you on his bar stool" as the night wound down. They were on the cusp. They never got there. And I think that is the most devastating part of this story. And that's the story, the case of the Last Call killer.
Well, let's rename him. That's too flashy for bin bag killer.
I'm personally a fan of piece of shit.
Well, he's that too.
Simple and to the point. You know, I really couldn't find a whole lot of information on his upbringing, like the actual upbringing. I couldn't find a lot of information about more of his motive beyond that biblical content. And so it's always a terrible story. We don't do not terrible stories, right?
Right.
But this one I think is particularly dissatisfying in the way that despite profiling, despite forensic examination, his behavior is still kind of unaccounted for. It's still, I hate to give criminals, particularly murderers, the attention of wanting to hear from them why they did what they did. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, there's a deep desire to understand what was the thought process. Like, how did you get here? Why did you do this? What were you searching for? And we rarely get that. But here, in a case where I feel like my brethren were murdered far before their time, I don't know, I think it feels especially dark and incredibly sad that a group of men who were successfully navigating the AIDS epidemic, largely not becoming ill or infected, when so many queer men's lives were being stolen from them, robbed And here, an instance where that didn't have to be the case, but because a man decided so, because Rogers decided that he could and should kill and dismember queer men, it's just really gross.
Yeah. Do we want to explore maybe motives?
I don't know. It feels like it could be an exercise in futility, but I'm also not opposed to it.
I think it's significant that he's choosing victims that are similar in age to himself. I think that it could be like a self-hatred thing. It sounds like he probably had some mental health issues that were untreated. If we knew more about his background, I would say maybe OCD, and possibly not on its own. Obviously, when we take the sexuality into account, paired with the idea of self-hatred, those two go hand in hand with somebody who is marking through a Bible. I mean, we know that it is very difficult for somebody who is raised Christian and told that being gay is a sin to come to terms with the fact that they are gay and how that manifests. And then I think paired with the lack of talking about it, the lack of sharing, the willingness to use the gay panic defense. I think that I could see all of those things supporting the notion that he carries a lot of self-loathing. But it's just crazy. Like, I know that he killed the guy when he was younger and he tied the one up, and they're suspicious that there are other deaths. And I know that you named some of those victims. It's very hard for me to grasp why he would start killing in his mid to late 40s, unless it's some sort of midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But,
kind of back to what I said about an exercise in futility, and it's this kind of potential self-hatred, and I know it's not, but it feels like an excuse. It feels like a mechanism to absolve guilt or responsibility, and again, that's not what it is, but it brings up questions of culture and society that are really hard to reckon with, especially, I look at modern day and how regressive things have become, and how hard we push against this idea of equality. And that begets even harder questions, which is sometimes who really cares? Who cares about these people? Who cares about me? Who cares about people like me? Who cares about people that are so different from me but still marginalized? And I don't know how to help people that don't care enough about themselves. And I think about, there's been controversy, not to give spoilers to any of our fans who might also be fans of Drag Race, but recently it's been spread that a cast member for season 19 is pro-MAGA. And it asks us to do kind of self-examination about how we interact and how we deal and how we find ways to build common ground without asking the same of the other party. And it's deeply unfair. And these questions can't be posed to the people that he harmed. And so I don't even know that feels totally related to what we were talking about, but it's where it took my mind.
Sure. To be clear, obviously, I know that you've already said this, but I'm not trying to excuse. I'm never going to try to excuse any of these criminals that we cover on here. I just have this really strong need to understand, and we're not necessarily going to understand, but there's something maybe cathartic in a way for me to go through the possibilities. I mean, you've seen me before. I can be like a dog with a bone about things until they click and they make sense. And then I can start accepting things, but they have to make sense first. And so I don't need to explain things away. I just need to understand.
Right.
Which was the purpose of talking about the potential why and analyzing the age of his victims and the nods to probably a very Christian, potentially strict Christian upbringing. But also we know that mental illness will commonly manifest as some sort of religious fixation too. But that's a whole different podcast. I think this was an important story. to share. And you asked earlier, who cares about you? I care about you and people like you. And I try to show up in classrooms when I hear language that is potentially harmful to young children being uttered by other young children. I always correct it and explain. So I try to correct that, and then obviously I speak on this podcast and I try to navigate conversations to the best of my ability about communities to which I do not belong, but to which I try to be a decent ally for, and cover some cases that does the same. I don't know how many, just Marsha P. Johnson for me, yeah? Probably. But do you want me to cover gay cases, or do you like covering them and then getting me to just kind of bumble along with words? Okay.
I like both. But I like that we do that for every group. I like that we don't just come on here and talk about queer cases. We don't come on here and just talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women. We don't come on here and just talk about sexual violence. We come on here to talk about crimes that afflict every group of people. And I just like that we share these stories that don't get heard. I think today's in particular is just kind of weird and raw because it brings up questions related to me. But just like when I went over, just like when I talked about how I had my cousin break out our back door window so that he could get in, and you immediately thought, oh, absolutely not. I'm a woman. I'm too vulnerable, right? And so, or Mary Vincent, or any of the other countless women that we've covered on this podcast that were victimized just because they are women.
No end of that in true crime. No end. Mm-mm.
So that's all we've got for this episode. Thank you for listening.
Until the next crime.
If you enjoyed listening and want to hear more, please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave a review.
The link to joining our supportive bestie tier on Patreon for, again, only $2 a month is listed in the show notes.
Also, make sure you're following us at End of Crime Pod on Instagram.
Our email address is endofcrimepod@gmail.com, so feel free to reach out with questions or episode suggestions.